Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm here to introduce what we're doing in Auckland Council around the Smart City programme. It is a relatively sneak peek into what we're doing. I've been in position about 4 months over from the UK. My role previously was around embedding innovation and technology in our major infrastructure programs for a global civil engineering company. I think what my role is here is to bridge that gap between the digital and the physical to enable these technologies to actually take hold and deliver value for both the city but also the market and the industry that sits around it. So I'm going to give you a very sneak peek into how we're developing this program. It's looking to be launching at the end of August, early September. So unfortunately the slides are still in production. The graphics team have not let me down because I'm one of those bad clients that didn't get them the requirements quickly enough. But what you'll see is just an introduction to what the Smart City program will be, how it's going to be delivered, and some of those areas where potentially technology and innovation can play a role in that, specifically linked to payments and the technologies that you've already been talking about today. Smart City is one of those very frustrating phrases, a little bit like innovation, which has multiple meanings. It can mean everything and nothing to people all at once. It has both a citizen focus in terms of quality of life outcomes. When people talk about the smart city, typically they mean making good decisions, being able to deliver a better quality of life for the residents. But it also has a very data-driven focus. So companies like IBM and Cisco see it as using data efficiently and effectively to make better decisions that can deliver those outcomes. From a more broader sort of scope, it's an ongoing process. It's not necessarily one which is fixed at any given point in time, but rather something that you're continually working on and striving to. So utilizing data and technology to give you a better insight into what's going on so you can deliver better outcomes for the city, for the environment, for efficiency and effectiveness within that stream. That comes on to why is it important to Auckland to have a smart city program, and what are the things that are really relevant to us here? Well, I think there are some key things that we're all aware of as Aucklanders. First of all, water quality is an issue that I think we care deeply about. SafeSwim is one of those websites that we use to highlight the problem from the perspective of whether or not an area is safe to swim in. I think technology plays a huge role in being able to understand how best to deliver better water quality outcomes. Transport's also a key issue that we care about. It can be quite difficult getting into work in a car in the morning. Luckily, I get the bus and it's not a problem at all. But how do we integrate those different transport systems so that you can get a better outcome for people that are living, working and travelling through the area? And of course, there is a need for better housing, for better urban development in a way that allows parts of the city to operate more effectively and efficiently, both in terms of mobility, but in terms of urban development as well. So the key comes back to what does a smart city really mean to Auckland, and how do we find out? Well, the smart city concept is one of those really complex, messy problems where it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to everybody. Within the Auckland plan, we talk about Auckland becoming one of the world's best cities, a world-class city. I refer to that really as the world's most livable city. For me, that has a bit more resonance because it starts taking into account some of those environmental and social outcomes that I think are so important. It does talk about homes, it talks about transport, it talks about places, but until we really go to a consensus-building activity where we can try and understand what a smart city means for different people within the city, we can't objectively say that it is one thing or another. So the Smart City programme is really about holding a collective conversation across Auckland, across its residents, across its businesses, across the council family, to try and identify what are those outcomes that we really care about. What are the principles by which it should be delivered by? Things like privacy, security, and sovereignty of data. But then also, what are those component parts? What's it made up of? Is it sensors? Is it data analytics? Is it decision making? And how do we, as a collectively, as an organisation, understand what we should be delivering to? So the Smart City programme is about holding that type of activity across a 2-year program to be able to inform what we should be investing in, what we care about, and what other people care about. It's about having a consensus across the city, a public dialogue around some of these issues, not just with the city, but also with the CCOs and industry. We need to co-deliver this. I mean, this is very much from an Auckland City's perspective, an Auckland Council's perspective about what the Smart City programme is. But from the market's perspective and from an individual perspective, what it really means to us is how do we involve and engage the market in delivering the Smart City? How do we co-design, co-develop and co-deliver those projects and those programmes that make up a Smart City? Well, we'll be holding a series of workshops beginning in August to really bottom that out, to inform what a 2-year programme of proof of concepts and pilots are really going to deliver, with an aim of hitting the long-term plan in 2021 with a range of investment decisions that will help deliver those outcomes that we know are necessary. So to quickly go on to some of the potential opportunities, and I've been told to try and keep to 305, so 310, so I'll try and keep this a little bit short. I think it's building on some of the technologies that we've already discussed this afternoon. So some of the key enablers here are things like blockchain, where you have transparent, secure, and interrogatable transactions. Things like open banking, which allow users to be able to optimize their purchasing. From a council perspective, we have to use that data better, to make better whole life decisions, to use data analytics in a way that informs interventions. But also, how do we change our organisational structure? How do we change the operation and the delivery of services across the market in a way that allows outcomes to be the primary focus? To click back on some of the examples here, if you look at SafeSwim is essentially an outcome of infrastructure which is operating to a certain way. If you look at the water quality as being the outcome that we want to deliver, the infrastructure becomes an enabler, and the data and the technology placed into it becomes that thing that we understand how the infrastructure is operating. In this context, the infrastructure is operating as a service, and the organisations that deliver that service might need to restructure themselves in a way that enables the outcome to be the primary focus of the procurement mechanism. So we see that both in terms of water quality, but also in terms of things like flood control. We also look at transport and logistics and mobility as a service, as a way in which we can look at payments for specific projects and programs which are based on the outcome of that service provision. So if you look at mobility as a service, what we're trying to do in that context is understand how best to get somebody from somewhere to somewhere else in the fastest way possible, and also in the most balanced way. So that could be in terms of cost, carbon, or also the optimized route for the city. It opens up new ways in which you could pay for these things. So in that context, you need a blockchain to understand how a car is traveling across a bridge, how it's utilizing roads, so it can look at payment mechanisms to the bridge and the road designer and operator. It also looks at piecing together different parts of the mobility journey so that you can look at the whole life ticket value and understand what is the best way to structure those different parts of the mobility system. It's not just about transporting people, but also about transporting goods. Logistics is one of those key bits. The Port of Auckland here is going through an automation process, which I think it hopes to complete within the next couple of years. This is essentially about using robotics to load and unload the cargo ships that are coming into Auckland. Minutes or second delays can cause a lot of cost when it comes to the offloading of these huge vessels. In order to make sure that that is done in the most efficient and effective way possible, we have to be able to ensure that the transport network behind it is one that can be operated and maintained in the most optimized way. Otherwise, there will be huge costs that knock on down through the chain. One of the other things we're doing around infrastructure and housing development as well is trying to turn the construction industry into more like a manufacturing technology type of aspect, where we look at modularization, what we call floating factories, which is essentially just-in-time manufacturing on a construction site. These all require really big logistics exercises to ensure those parts and those products and materials can get to exactly where they need to be. That requires us to operate the system in a very different way. So looking at how the operation of that system can be identified and ensured that it's done in a way which is interrogatable, but also defendable, so that transactions can be paid based on the operation or the outcome of that system, is a key enabler. The smart grid is often referred to as energy surplus and supply and demand trading, but it also links into water. So if you look at integrated smart meters with water and energy, trying to find a way in which we can optimize the supply and demand of energy across the network means we don't have to invest so much in infrastructure costs in the first place. But that requires multiple different transactions to happen between both users, machines, and the system itself to try and find the best configuration balance on a minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis. That requires to have that traceability, that transparency of those transactions that are happening, but also the optimization of that across multiple different users and systems. To do that requires things like blockchain. It requires big machine learning type exercises, but it also requires things like open banking, which can get the best deal for the users and for the people owning the technology in their homes, the cars, and various other places. Wrong way, sorry. The last one is a little bit more difficult to explain visually. The circular economy is a type of approach to look at how materials and goods and resources flow through the economy so that there is no waste. And this is in part around designing out waste from the initial part through reuse and modularization, but it's also about tracking materials and resources as they move through the system, being able to trace where they are and optimize their flow to ensure that they arrive back at the right point in time for remanufacturing or reuse. This requires being able to trace the cost and the value of those materials as they move through the system to then optimize how you get them back to the start. In all of these examples, what we're looking at is a new way to be able to identify how something is performing, capturing the data, analyzing it in a way that gives us extra information. But it requires transparency in terms of how that operation is performing and how we can base value and cost associated to that. That requires, I think, in my mind, much as Jerome was talking about earlier, a much more decentralized approach to how we store and use information. I think we'll see a lot more around things like the self-organizing distributed network, how phones become a key part of servers in the transmission of information and data, but also how things like the solid-state platform that's been developed at MIT can provide that transparency and that legitimacy behind some of these transactions. It also requires, I think, people to become much greater users and owners of their data in a way that provides a mechanism for us to optimize our own decisions with a mind of how that helps the system optimize its performance, its delivery. That's where I am for the end of this session. We've got 5 minutes for questions, or more than happy to take them later on. Entirely up to you.